Hey everyone, Lindsay Adler here, and today we're going to be talking about shooting your very first fashion editorials. Well, even if it's not your first shoot, I'm going to cover the essentials of what you need to know for a successful editorial. Now, before we get started, I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that this is my very first video in a brand new series for Adorama TV, and it's all about fashion and beauty photography. And I'm super excited because I have a long list of things I want to share with you, everything from lighting techniques to looks inside the business part of the industry. I know you're going to love it, so stay tuned because there are going to be regular updates. For those of you who don't know me, I would like to give you just a quick little tidbit of my background so you know where I'm coming from. I'm a fashion and beauty photographer based in New York, and I've been shooting for more than a decade here in New York. Now, my time in this industry, I've been lucky. It's been exciting and rewarding, and I've had the honor to shoot for dream clients and dream publications and all of that. But before diving into the world of fashion, I actually ran a portrait studio in a small town in upstate New York. I'm an image maker, I'm an educator, and I love to share with others, and that is why I am here to share with you. Now, with that, on to what you are here for, the tips for your first fashion editorial shoots. Now, I have actually been shooting for more than half of my life, and I remember my first fashion editorial. I was living in upstate New York, and I grabbed a friend as a model. I borrowed some clothing from a local fashion boutique. I picked some random clothing looks. I did extravagant hair and makeup on the subject. I changed the lighting a lot, and unfortunately, it was only later that I learned that this was not the right way to go about a fashion editorial. It's not just that I got better at photography, but my approach has changed. Through the years, I have learned so much. I'm going to pass it on to you. I have a better understanding of what it takes to bring together a team and to create powerful images. I've now been in countless magazines, prestigious publications like Marie Claire, Harper's Bazaar, Numero L, and through all of that, I've learned a lot, and I'd like to share some of the basics of what it takes to conceptualize, plan, and execute a successful fashion editorial. Now, in the future, I plan on doing a video about what it takes to submit to a magazine and get published. I could talk about this for hours. There's a lot to cover, but for now, let's actually just begin at the beginning with the basics of your first shoot. Any successful fashion editorial starts with a concept, an idea. Now, an editorial is usually a series of images that are somehow joined together by a common thread. You're telling a visual story. You have a theme. And when I say story, I'm not trying to imply that it needs to be a narrative. It doesn't need to have a beginning, middle, or end. It can have a theme like color blocking, knitwear, neons. If you want the images to be published in a magazine, you have to keep in mind other things like seasonal fashion trends or the types of brands that are appearing in those target publications. But if it's just for you, if it's just for fun, you just need to have a story, an idea. Now, as you start to develop your concept, what you're going to do is put together something called a mood board. A mood board is a collection of images that express the visual direction of the shoot. It's your visual roadmap. Now, usually it includes references of other people's photographs, maybe it's sketches, it's anything that you need to spell out the important visual elements of the shoot. That means you'll have references probably for hair and makeup, lighting, set design, really anything that you need to communicate your idea. And I find these images, my inspiration in magazines, photo books, maybe Instagram, Pinterest, you name it. Now, all of the pieces of the visual equation, all of this, from the lighting to the clothing, the models' poses, all of that, they have to work together to reinforce your concept, but that's why you need to have a concept first, so you know how the pieces will fit together. Now, in a fashion shoot, you aren't working alone. You're working with a team, and I'm going to talk about this in the next section, how important they are, but because you're working with other creatives, a mood board is an incredibly important way to get everyone on the same page, get everyone prepared for the shoot. Now, for example, a makeup artist, they need to know what you're thinking because maybe they're going to start sketching out their own ideas. Maybe they'll research inspiration for other makeup. Maybe they need to buy materials. If you don't communicate your needs, your thoughts, your ideas, they'll likely show up unprepared to execute your vision. Now, by the way, a mood board, it doesn't need to be anything formal or fancy. I mean, a lot of people, they just use Pinterest. It's a good way to save images and you caption them and you direct the team. Personally, I use a free template on canva.com, or I might just build a grid in Photoshop. And a single page usually does a trick, but it will definitely include references of the things that are most important to the success of the shoot. For this particular shoot, I decided that the concept was red on red on red on red, red clothing, red makeup, red background, just luscious, rich red. And so that's my theme, that's my story. It's all about a color. So when I put together this mood board, I included a photograph of the model, samples of some of the creative makeup concepts that I was thinking about. I included the type of dramatic lighting that I was thinking about. And, I've shot red, honestly, a million times. I'm very inspired by it. And so some of the photos on the mood board are my own photographs, but they don't need to be. So after creating the mood board, I sent it on to my creative team. We discussed it. I got their thoughts, their feedback, and then we started planning for the shoot. Now, by the way, a mood board, it's a guideline. Just know that you're allowed to change your mind and evolve. I mean, on the shoot day, once you see everything in front of you, chances are something is going to change. During my very first fashion shoots, I did it all. I tried to apply some makeup on my subjects. I'd have them do their own hair. I would buy clothing. It's really common for photographers to start off doing many jobs on a shoot themselves. But the ones that are the most successful, the ones that create the images with impact, they're always working with other professionals, and these professionals help them look good. As photographers, we get used to being the one-man band, doing it all by ourselves, whether it's marketing or retouching or hair and makeup. But trust me, it is worth the effort to find other creatives to work with. They elevate the quality of work. They take you to the next level. So as you do a bunch of shoots and you experiment, eventually you build a good rapport with people. You find these creatives that they become what I call the creative team, your creative soulmates. Now, these artists, they help bring your images to life. They focus on their expertise and you direct them. I mean, it makes sense. Of course, someone who is had decades crafting beautiful hairstyles is going to do a much better job than you at making the hair look good. So find experts who make you look like more of an expert. And when I've referred to creative team, I'm usually talking about people like hairstylists and makeup artists, wardrobe stylists, but could be anyone else that is needed for the shoot. It could be a manicurist, a set designer, a florist. It all depends on what your concept is. Now, it of course is one thing for me to say, okay, go gather and find these people, but where do you find them? I suggest that you start networking with people on social platforms like Instagram. One approach would be to find a local photographer or other local models and then dive in, see who they've tagged in their work, see who they've worked with. And then if you go through a few photographers or through a few models, you start diving in, you see that there is a web of local talent, hairstylists, makeup artists. And so use these to build your connections and reach out to them, start planning shoots. Now, you may also want to try other networks like Model Mayhem, or you can look for creatives at a local hair salon. You can borrow clothing from a local boutique. You can even collaborate with fashion students at a local university. And yes, this does take effort. It does take legwork, but eventually what happens is you find a team that understands exactly what your vision is. They understand your style and they're inspired by your mood board. Now, of course, finding a good model is key to all of this. And in future videos, I'm going to talk about how to find models and how to work with model agencies. For this editorial, I worked with a really small team. I worked with a wardrobe stylist and one person who did both the hair and makeup. The subject hair was really short. We didn't really need anything extravagant. And the mood board showed that the makeup was leading the way, but the hair just simply wasn't as important. So I was able to complete the shoot with one hair makeup artist, a wardrobe stylist, and a model. When you shoot a fashion editorial, the goal is to create a series that works together to tell a visual story, but you don't want it to be static. You don't want it to be boring and repetitive. Unless it's part of the concept, you really don't want to have the same model and the same pose with the same expression, the same lighting, the same crop. It's just so boring. Your job as a photographer is to ride the line between cohesion for that story and variety. Now, personally, my approach is that I keep the lighting the same, but I try to change things like the posing and the clothing. I find that especially when you're first starting off, if you have multiple models and you switch up the lighting, all of a sudden it feels like there's several stories going on and they're all mixed together and it's usually a mess and it's stressful, and don't do it. Keep it simple and cohesive. I know you'll thank me. I think that when I look at people shooting their first fashion editorials, they usually try too much too soon and it's too complicated. So for this shoot, you'll see that I did 6 different styling looks and I captured these to tell my story. So while the clothing's changed, the clothing was switched up, but it's cohesive because they were all the color red. And yes, the makeup changed 3 times, but each time I brought red into the makeup design. The lighting and the set stayed pretty much the same throughout. And really it was the pose, the crop, and the expression that I used to create variation. For this shoot, I used my Canon R5 and my RF 24-105. I also used a 3-light setup with my PROFOTO D1 and D2 strobes. Now, the main light. I used a grid to create a concentrated, bright, contrasty light on the face. And I did move this around a little bit. Sometimes I had it centered on the face, other times I moved it off to the side to give me a bit of a Rembrandt lighting position. Next, I used a large umbrella with diffusion to the front of the frame to fill in the shadows. Now, what was good is that it would light the subject from head to toe, which was great for the full-length shots. Finally, I used another grid to illuminate the background. What it did is it created a little bit of glow behind the subject and some separation. The lighting and overall vibe, it stayed the same throughout the entire shoot. I hardly made any changes. Even my retouching style remained the same. All of this worked together to create cohesion for the story. Now, one other thing to keep in mind is that if you want to publish in a magazine, you'll need to have at least 5 different changes, since that's usually what's considered the minimum to create a story. So for fashion, change the clothing 5 times at least. A beauty editorial, maybe you change the makeup 5 times, or the hair, or the jewelry. Remember, these changes, they shouldn't be dramatic in different directions. They should all support the story, the concept that you had for this editorial. Now, if you aim to get published, you also want to make sure that you use different brands. So it shouldn't all be the same designer of clothing or all the same makeup brands. The magazines are looking for a little bit of variety. So your goal, to create variety, interest, but remember your underlying concept. I hope these tips have helped give you a little guidance when you start your first fashion editorials. And now is a really, really good time to start gathering your inspiration. Start looking around, building mood boards, get your ideas brewing, start reaching out to other creatives, share your mood boards with them, start planning your shoots. It's never too soon. And if you want to see the gear that I use for creating this editorial and these looks, be sure to check out the links below, and of course to visit Adorama.com. And if you want to see more about fashion and beauty photography, you can also check out my YouTube channel for a lot of behind the scenes shoots and lighting techniques. But of course, you are definitely going to want to stay tuned here because I'm going to be continuing my series on fashion and beauty photography. I can't wait to keep sharing with all of you. See you next time.